Hey everyone, Thingy here with a nice quick start guide of how to play Glacial Spike in 7.2.5. So Glacial Spike is pretty much this really cool spell that we have, this talented spell that takes all of our icicles, combines them all into one big giant Glacial Spike and shoots it off. It looks really cool, it's kind of fun to play, and it's very close to Thermal Void in balance wise right now. So kind of like, just try either one, see which one you like, and you'd probably be just about competitive with either one. Alright, that being said, let's see how it works. So first of all, the way that this spec kind of plays is that if you can imagine kind of like a combo point system, where each Frostbolt generates a combo point. In our case, an icicle. So based off our mastery, which every time you cast a Frostbolt, you gain an icicle above your head, like this. There it is right there. And I have it tracking here with number 1. So you can store up to 5 icicles. They store a certain amount of damage based on your mastery, which is based on your Frostbolt damage. And they'll store up to 5, and then they'll combine in some formula to make a Glacial Spike. So if I go my 2, 3, 4, and 5. I have a nice little proc there. These are all weak auras. I can put these in the description if you need. So now you have 5 here, and then you can shoot off your Glacial Spike. It becomes active. You can see down here it's flashing. It's kind of a long cast. Builds up in this really cool thing, and you shoot it off for millions of damage. So the cool thing about Glacial Spike and the way it works with your icicles and frostbolts are that it double dips. So it used to double dip on versatility, it doesn't anymore, but it double dips on crit. So if your Frostbolt's crit, that builds up the damage of the Glacial Spike, and your Glacial Spike can crit. So you have all that damage built up from your Frostbolt's critting into the icicles, they all combine, and then that spell and the total damage can crit as well from the Glacial Spike. Things like any kind of percentage or damage modifier or buff. I think it's Maiden in Tomb of Sargeras, where you can collect orbs and you get a plus damage buff. So if you go into that, you'll actually get higher Frostbolts, and then on top of that, a higher Glacial Spike. It's like, it used to be like a really big deal when it was versatility. It's a really cool bonus now, and it's not overpowered or anything, but it's definitely nice to have. So, talents. I have my talents open here. Talents that you're most likely going to use are very cookie cutter. Lonely Winter, it's not even a question. This will increase your Frostbolt, Ice Lance Flurry, Frozen Orb by a certain amount of damage. Most important thing right there is the Frostbolt damage, because that leads to your icicles and your mastery, and that translates into higher Glacial Spikes overall. Next row, Shimmer, Ice Flows, Glacial Insulation. Doesn't really matter what you choose here. Most people choose between Shimmer or Ice Flows. I go Shimmer just because I like having Shimmer off the GCD, and having 2 charges is nice. Casting while moving is pretty good too, but I find that Shimmer is easier, and I tend to waste more Ice Flows charges than I do actually using them. Next row down here, typically everybody's going to be taking Incanter's Flow at this point. Glacial Spike used to be played with Rune of Power, but now, I mean, they're fairly close. Incanter's Flow tends to beat it out, especially since you don't have to cast Rune of Power and stand in it and limit yourself. So it's a lot easier. You always want to take Splitting Ice on this next row. Typically, it's Frozen Touch versus Splitting Ice, like if you're playing Thermal Void. But just for Glacial Spike, this increases 5%. So, plus you can cleave, which is pretty nice. So, I mean, that's 5% Icicles damage, so you're going to get more out of that than you will the extra few Fingers of Frost procs from Frozen Touch. Next row, doesn't really matter what you pick here, DPS wise. I just choose Frigid Winds all the time. It's just an additional slow for Mythic Plus or something like that, or out in the world. The next one, you're just mostly going to choose between Unstable Magic and Arctic Gale. Unstable Magic for strictly single target, Arctic Gale anytime you're going to use a Blizzard. So usually like 2+ creatures. And then of course Glacial Spike. So those are talents. As far as gear goes, I'm going to open up my gear set. It's not very optimal yet, but just a quick rundown. And of course you always want to sim your stats to figure out what you want, because Glacial Spike loves most stats, pretty much all stats, so it's always going to be a balancing act. So you definitely want to sim yourself to figure out exactly where you stand and what's going to be the best for you at that current moment. But in general, I mean, it wants to hit the shatter cap, which is 33.33%. If you don't know about the shatter cap, I'm not really going to get into it in this video, but you can look it up. Pretty much just any target treated as frozen has a higher chance to crit. So if you reach 33.33%, you should have 100% crit on your frozen spells, or spells on a frozen target. See, I'm at 27%. I'm not quite there. It's not a huge deal, but it gets to be a big deal further on into tier, especially if you get your 2-piece tier 20, which I'll get into in a little bit. So yeah, I definitely want to get there. I'm just not there yet. And then after that, like I said, it's a balancing act. It loves mastery, it loves versatility, and haste is, it's okay, but it still needs some sort of haste to rely on, because I mean, otherwise you're casting some pretty slow frost bolts and glacial spikes. But like I said, let the sims tell you exactly what you need and go from there. Alright, so this is general gearing, and let's get into the rotation, or whatever it may be. So Glacial Spike, if you are used to playing Thermal Void, it plays almost exactly like that. The only difference is that you're obviously not going to have a long Icy Veins. You're going to use it as a DPS cooldown, because that's what it is. You get your extension, I mean, you don't get your Chill to the Core buff when you hit Icy Veins, so that's definitely nice when you're using your Glacial Spike and all your abilities. But yeah, if you know how to play Thermal Void, Glacial Spike is a breeze. You're pretty much building up to the 5 icicles, casting Glacial Spike, and keep going. You're still using your procs in the same priority. You're casting your Fingers of Frost procs as priority. You're casting your Frostbolt into Brain Freeze, into Ice Slants, the non-FOF one. And then you're casting a Glacial Spike at 5 icicles. So a couple of things are, when you cast Glacial Spike, or when you're going to cast Glacial Spike, you want to use it pretty much as soon as you can. You don't really hold on to Glacial Spike. When you hit those 5 icicles, you use it. You don't fish for any more procs. That being said, if you are at 3 or 4 icicles, which is why it's important to track them, and you get a Brain Freeze proc, you want to hold that Brain Freeze proc until you get your 5 icicles for Glacial Spike. The reason being is that Glacial Spike now shatters. So we all know with Frostbolt, you can shatter Frostbolt, you can shatter Ebon Bolt with Brain Freeze because it treats the target as frozen. You can now do the same thing with Glacial Spike. The only time it doesn't really work is if you're in melee, so you don't really want to be up close, which is kind of a change from last patch, but anyways. So that's the thing. 3 or 4 icicles, hold on to that Brain Freeze proc, use it with your Glacial Spike. It's definitely worth it. Even if you munch one, I mean, you're getting a guaranteed crit on your Glacial Spike if you're at your shatter cap. Alright, so let's go through it a little bit. The opener, some people can use Frostbolt, I use Ebon Bolt. I pretty much do the same thing as when I'm playing Thermal Void. So I'm just going to open up. Use that right away. And then just start using your procs and Frozen Orb, all that stuff. So now I'm at 5. I don't have a Brain Freeze proc, so I'm just going to shoot off anyways. And just keep building up. But it's the same priority with all your procs. So a little unlucky there. I'm not really getting many Brain Freeze procs. Just because I want to show you holding it. Come on, Brain Freeze. It's definitely just not going to proc now while I'm trying to do this. Go through one more rotation just to see. There's one. And there we go. So that's kind of like the rotation. The only difference now is if you get tier 20, I'm going to open it up. I have the 2-piece, just got it last night. So the 2-piece is Frozen Orb increases your critical strike damage by 20% for 10 seconds. What this means is that all of your spells that crit are going to be doing more damage. And since hopefully we're at the shatter cap, and we're shooting off our Glacial Spike in that 10-second window, with a Brain Freeze, we will get a very highly damaged Glacial Spike. I mean, it works with your Frostbolts too. Like I said, the spec double dips. So if your Frostbolts crit, those are just bigger icicles if you used for your bigger Glacial Spike. But this changes how we play a little bit and how we use our Frozen Orb. So anytime you can, if Frozen Orb and Icy Veins are coming off cooldown around the same time, I would delay one or the other just so you can line them up. And at the same time, if you have about 10 seconds left on the cooldown of Frozen Orb, you want to start saving procs. Try and get up to your 5 icicles, and even if you have to overwrite the icicles without using Glacial Spike with a few seconds left here, do it. Save your procs, have your 5 icicles, so that way when you cast this Frozen Orb, you can see the buff right up here, Frozen Mass, critical strike damage increased by 20%, and I have a weak aura tracker here that shows you the 10 seconds. Once you cast that, you should be able to shoot off all of your procs, and you want to make sure that you get a very large Glacial Spike going there. It's a nice buff. It's probably one of the best set bonuses in the game for any spec, just because of how Glacial Spike is working at the moment. I mean, it's really good for Thermal Void too, don't get me wrong, but Glacial Spike can get some very high numbers like that. Alright, I think I've covered everything. So just a quick recap on the rotation. Make sure that you're using like your icicles as combo points. Get up to 5, use your procs like you normally would as priority, and get your Glacial Spike shot off at your 5 icicles. If you're at 3 or 4 icicles, save your Brain Freeze proc for Glacial Spike and cast it right after it to shatter it. So yeah, this is a very simple spec. It's not really hard to play, should be good for progression. I mean, your movement is still decent, aside from when you're just sitting there casting Glacial Spike, but overall it's pretty good. I'm probably switching to it for progression just because I'm just trying for a change of pace. I was playing Thermal Void all expansion long so far, but you know, it's time for a change. It's close, very close in numbers to Thermal Void, and I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. So that being said, I'm going to leave some weak auras in the comments, and well, in the description, and then let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, guys.